My name is George Clayton Johnson. I'm a writer. I have written for TV and for movies. In movies, Ocean's 11, Logan's Run. In TV, The Twilight Zone, Star Trek, Kung Fu, Route 66, Mr. Novak, The Law and Mr. Jones, Honey West. In books and in magazines, I will bring this up here, but up here is a book I just wrote. It's been out since August. It can be bought from Subterranean Press in Flint, Michigan. And I have also got another book out here, which is right here.
I'll get it, George. There we go.
These are all for the purpose of introducing me. This one is called Twilight Zone Scripts and Stories. These are the scripts and the stories I wrote for Rod Serling's The Twilight Zone. And this is the picture they used to illustrate the book, which is me. Now, as a writer, I've been at it for 45 years, and I've earned my living and paid for my home out of money earned from writing stories of various kinds for various purposes for quite a few years. Okay, in the course of that, I have had an awful lot of opportunity not to spend my time doing what other people want me to do, but to spend my time doing what I want to do. That every hour of mine is valuable, because that's all I have in my life is time. So when I have to sell my time, I try to think in terms of, that sort of boggles my mind. So I found that the best way for me to function is to go make something. If I cannot describe it well enough to someone, write it down. First in the form of an outline, perhaps, then in the form of a script or in the form of a book, so as to show it to others and try to complete it without asking their advice. So that then when I give it to them, it is as I want to do it, and therefore I'm not selling my time to anybody. I'm giving my time to myself, which amounts to my being prepared day after day after day to sit around quietly and think, to direct my thought towards something, perhaps in a concept or an idea or a plan or a scheme, coming to try to understand something, coming to try to understand myself, trying to go past all the evasions and to remember what really happened that night in that alley. Not the story I tell my friends, and then not the story I tell myself in order to be able to tell the story to my friends, but what really went on. Let's look at it, that tape. It's somewhere in my mind. Click, 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 one frame at a time. Now, that business of going back through one's consciousness, its purpose, I suppose, is to bring into conscious awareness unconscious thinking, because we think all of the time. When somebody looks at you and says, "What are you thinking?" and you don't, "I was not thinking anything." No, you're not aware of thinking anything, but beneath awareness, you're thinking a mile a minute about the job, about how to get that money, about how to pay that debt, about how to solve that puzzle. And all that stuff is cooking in the background, so that ultimately it gets down to a game almost of asking the subconscious a question. It's like, why do they always say no to tobacco? They say no to alcohol. But they say no to marijuana. Now, why such a great no? I've often wondered. No one has ever died from using it. That's a darn good argument there that you can't make for those other drugs. So why so great a no? It's a damned plant. You're not guilty of a crime if you're committing some horticulture somewhere. You're growing an orchid. Does that make you a criminal? A poppy? Does that make you a criminal? Now, these are organic things. And when we start to even to try to think about civilization in the large, we've got to find a way to make it self-renewing, self-sustaining. We cannot keep mining stuff out of the ground or burning up our petroleum. We have to find a way so that every year we get a new stock of everything we need. We need new food, the trees will grow us new food. We need new energy, marijuana. We need new food, marijuana. We need new oil. You know, the marijuana seed, one of the most fascinating things about it is this.
Lubricating oil, George. Lubricating oil?
Hell no. Why did you do that, Richard?
I'm sorry, George.
No, don't be sorry. Explain to me why you did it.
I was trying to be helpful with you because I thought you were talking about the aspect of the seed and the oil and the many applications of it, like for lubricating oil.
It's one of the things that you do. Right, I get you. So, now, the thing about the little seed itself, though, is that not only does it have lubricating oil in it, and it has energy in it. It's so many things. It's oil. It's like whale oil. Whale oil, you could run lamps. You can burn lamps with whale oil. Hemp oil, you can burn lamps with hemp oil. It's an oil. But one of the things about this oil, most miraculous thing about it, it is immensely rich in essential fatty acids called linolenic and linoleic acids. And that this seed provides oils that contain in large abundance quantities of omega-6, omega-3, and omega-9. Now, normally we think of fish oils as a source for these kind of high-test, polyunsaturated oils. But they are essential fatty acids, and they call them essential because unless you get them, you die. You die. It may take a while for you to die because there's a little bit of them in potatoes, and there's quite a bit of it in pumpkin, and there's quite a lot of it in flaxseed oil, and in evening primrose oil, but it's rich in the hemp oil. And so the fact that hemp is almost a perfect protein substance, that it's a Ediston protein, they call it, because like a bean or a seed, it's all most of them are all curled up like this, and you've got to boil them for hours before they start to loosen up and open up, and then the hydrochloric acids and the parts of the stomach can get in there and devour all that food. But as long as it's all clinched up like that, it's very hard to digest. But hemp seeds are Ediston. They're already opened inside. They're not clinched tight. They've already been opened up so that they're much more digestible form of vegetable protein than anything you could find, including peas. Now, what do they call those things? Those oil, special kind of peas that I think it is? Beans. Soybeans, that's it, soybeans. Soybeans are very, very rich in these kinds of substances also. So, in any event, I ask myself, why so great a no? Because here's one thing, it's a tremendous food source. We could feed the world in an ever renewable way, never having to tap in on resources, because each season we could grow new seeds. And when we're growing plants for seeds, we have to take up about 8 or 10 feet of property to do it. But they say that some 75 to 80% of the weight of the plant is seed by weight when the plant is harvested, when they're growing it for seed. And if they're growing it for seed, they can be growing it for food. And this kind of food can be put in 1,000 ways. If it's just jammed together, it can form a kind of a peanut butter-like substance. It actually becomes kind of gluey when you put it in a pulverizer. One of those mechanical machines, osterizer type machines, these immediately seeds will start to get gluey and gummy because the oil that's in them will start to mix with both the outer shell, which is a perfect little piece of packaging, the inner protein, and the oil that's in the protein. So now here we got a fantastic food source, and that's just one of the many miracle properties of the hemp plant. You hear people talking about fabric. There are only 3 different natural fibers plus hemp. There's silk, there's wool, there's cotton, and then there's hemp. And it turns out that hemp is more absorbent, and it's softer, and it's longer lasting, and it's got this property, and it's got that property, and it's just a fantastic thing for making everything from diapers to dishcloths to damask tablecloths. You can make almost anything out of this beautiful plant, and it's like these long chain molecules, so that it's one long hair, one long strand, one long fiber, and then these long fibers are not chopped up like cotton is and dusted into these poly things, but all woven together, and it lasts forever, and it's strong strong and it's absorbent and it's clean and it's beautiful. And it's being made today by entrepreneurs all over the country, clothing made out of hemp. And I don't mean just the twill kind of a clothing that you would expect from something that you think of like a canvas. This stuff can be as fine as silk. This is amazing stuff, depending upon how it is harvested and how it is grown and for what purposes it is being grown. And grown in one way, it's rich this way. Grown in another way, it's rich that way. It can grow from the Arctic, I mean literally from the tops of mountains down into the deepest of valleys. It can go from very, very cold to very, very hot. It loves sunlight. It's totally happy when it's getting sunlight. I think its grand affinity with human man is that we are both great users of sunlight. Man, in his brain, in his mind, he's just exploding and using sunlight all of the time. And I believe that this plant is the best thing for organizing sunlight that is on the planet, that it's found a way to get that sunlight. It makes it a bright and iridescent, almost green. It's spotted against any kind of foliage, and it is durable. It grows on marginal lands called marginal. Actually, it grows sometimes better in such swampy areas and places that you would normally think that plants couldn't thrive in. These hemp plants can thrive in it. They like water, but they're still pretty saving on water. Now, what's the big deal here? The big deal here is that for reasons that I personally do not understand, I cannot grok it. It's illegal. I don't understand it. It's called a Class 1 drug. That means it has no known medical uses. Now that's a lie. That's a lie. If at the very core of this argument there's a basic lie like that anyone can see through, then what the hell is going on here? We have before us a resource, unparalleled. Tax it like you would tobacco if you thought that made any sense. Think of the revenues that could come to the government out of it. It's harmless. Nobody dies from it. Children smoke it with no ill effects. What it does is it makes you very aware of the routine and the humdrum. It opens your mind and makes you more spiritual. It makes more of your spirit available to you. It raises your spirit levels. It also is a thinking thing. It makes you aware of consciousness itself. You become aware that you're thinking. First, you begin to notice things. Then you begin to notice that you're noticing. Then you begin to notice that you're noticing. And you build yourself up into higher and higher spiritual states with the aid of marijuana. And that's one of its chief things, is it reduces anxiety. Now, they say the number one killer in America is stress. Stress. That's anxiety. That's things cooking, too many things on the fire, too many things to do. Gotta go, panic, stress, adrenaline. Let's have a beer. That'll lower our stress. Let's smoke a cigarette. That'll lower our stress. Let's smoke a doobie. That will lower our stress. Now, if we lower our stress, then the number one killer doesn't get to us. We start laughing things off that we were very tense about before. We start talking about things that we've been very, very secretive about before. We start accepting people in ways that we haven't accepted them before. It's very tribal. You notice how they all get together and keep passing it around and all keep talking at the same time? It's an amazing phenomenon brought on by something that they sometimes call a hallucinogen. They often call it a euphoric. It's a medicine. According to California's 215, it's a very, very valuable medicine, which defies any kind of a classification of Class 1. The first intelligent thing would be to make it Class 2. Make it Class 2, then we could find ways to deal with it and turn it over to somebody to distribute. If you're not content to let the drug lords do it for the very expensive prices they must charge because of the tremendous effort being spent to stop them from doing what they're doing. But you put an end to all of that crap if you legalize it. It can't be prohibited. Abraham Lincoln said that. You know, prohibition just doesn't work. The minute you make something dear and strange, there are people who will want it. There are people who feel they are entitled to it. I mean, what's the point of being a millionaire if you cannot score a little pot once in a while? You know, this America works that way. So, I, as a writer, as a guy who spends his time just thinking things over, I look at all of the arguments brought forward against the pot. short-term memory loss. No, that just means the brain is spinning faster than it can organize all this stuff. But it'll remember it. And later on, when you ask a question about what went on during that period, oh, you have the answer. You just need a little while to file it. It's moving very quickly when the brain is stimulated to start to ponder and to probe and to think and to be aware and to experience and to, in many ways, to be here now, which in many ways is to be out there, drinking in all the color and all the stuff that's happening. It's a very strange world we're living in which being here now means really being out there. To really be in here now would be to be so lost in thought that others would shake you by the hand, but so lost in fascination with what you were thinking about, that you would be oblivious to all of these probing fingers. Now, being a writer for 45 years, that's a lot of payments to make on a house. That's a lot of meals to buy for family. That's a lot of clothing. That's a lot of automobiles and a lot of appointments and a lot of contracts that were entered into and met. And I'm a lifetime current member of the Writers Guild of America. I'm a veteran of World War II, and I have the Freedom Medal, which was awarded to everyone who was in the Army at the time the Japanese surrendered to Douglas MacArthur on, I think, the USS Missouri. Now, I'm a man in my majority. I am capable, I think, as well as anyone in this world, of determining for myself what is good for me and what is bad for me. And I've listened to all of these arguments, and I think of every one of them is trivial, lying, dumb. To hear these guys repeat these lines again and again, you can only conclude either that they're fools or they're villains, and they don't look smart enough to be villains. So like Mr. Barry McCaffrey, I would like to talk to this gentleman. Barry, let us meet somewhere so I can tell you, you, sir, are a fool. I don't know how you got to be where you are. Maybe that's how you got to be where you are. But you don't know what is happening. Get them to let you retire. Go rest. Now, marijuana. Why so great a no? Why not use the benefits of it for all of its many, many, many uses? Why not save the trees? Because many of us find them beautiful and make our paper out of hemp. Why not use the fact that it is filled with energy on almost every level? It can be compressed into pellets just like barbecue fuel, and it can be burnt in your charcoal burner. It is an amazing substance, largely harmless. Nobody dies, nobody gets sick. It's used as a medicine. Why not use the medicine before you need the medicine? Maybe then you'll never need the medicine. Maybe the only reason you need the medicine is because they deprived you of using the medicine. Now, what is it that hemp offers me? Because I smoke hemp. I freely admit that. I smoke it. Now, what do I smoke it for? Well, it makes me more gregarious and less uptight. I can cope with a lot of things. There's a rule called the rule of 5 plus or minus 2. Most people can handle about 5 things in memory. They can just remember 5 things. You add 6 or 7, well, yeah, some people can handle that, but some people want to go for a pencil. Some people can only handle 3, minus 2. They can only get 3 things, and then you want to make 4, they want the pencil. They want a list. Some people handle 7. See, now, 5 plus or minus 2 makes me like wandering around being a 7. I can handle 7 items, because when it gets to 8 or 9 or 10, then I too want to get a pencil and start to write it down. How far can I split my attention that way? How long can I hold in memory that many disparate items? It's a question of intellect and intelligence, and I can feel myself going up on that tone scale when I do this. From the aspect of first starting to notice things that before I hadn't noticed. My God, what a unique complex of colors or shapes or forms. And I notice things. And you're halfway to art right there. Because I think that William Saroyan was right when they asked him, what is art? He said, it is looking at things closely. For me, it is finding another way to do it, or a better way to do it. Because there are certain things you have to do, like chairness. Nobody has ever made the chair yet. Oh, we've had guys trying to make chairs or thrones or chairs or something. And Mr. Ames was pretty clever with his molded plywood. But somewhere out there in the world of chairness is the perfect chair. And some inventive person between now and the world of the future will come up with that chair, and everyone will take one look at it and know that is the chair. And they'll go buy it. And it may be stamped out of plastic for all the hell we know. But, you know, like the styrofoam cup, how many cups were invented before that thing come along? Find a new way to do things, and you will succeed. Or build a better mousetrap. It's just not a matter of being inventive and seeing things in a blinding flash, and suddenly you're as genius too. No, geniuses don't work that way. They baby up on things. They get a half of an idea, it looks glimmeringly interesting, and they go looking for support for it. And then they get it knocked apart by anybody who really knows, and then they start looking for other support for it. But eventually, intuition, or just it feels right, works. Because I've noticed in my writing that it doesn't function like logic does, where you have to prove things. No, it either feels right, it makes sense, yes, your mind goes with it, or it doesn't. And that is what makes for compelling writing and art. And a lot of it comes from dredging up reasons for things and looking at the alleged motives and reasons for why people do what they do. And you see that largely it is not for those reasons whatsoever. I mean, all this talk of the children, let us protect the children. Those persons are not really concerned with the children. They've got other ideas in mind. Anyway, thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you very much, George Clayton Johnson.
That's very strange.
A couple of questions I wanted to ask you about, George. And one of them was to do with the original episode of Star Trek. Now, did someone ask you to write that episode, or was that something you created? How was it that it came about?
Here's how TV works. There's a guy out there, and he's got a half of a show. It's called Captain Kirk, and it's called The Enterprise, and it's called Interstellar Space, and it's called Going Where No Man Has Gone Before. And it's got these relationships between these people. The doctor always talks to this guy that way, and he always talks to that guy that way. And they've got their little thing there, but they don't have a story. They got half of a story. So they go shopping for somebody with another half of a story. Okay, I'll use your spaceship and the way your people all use, and I'll use my idea. Now, my idea was a creature that could change herself to look like anyone. That when people would look at her, they would see the person they were thinking about, or that they thought the most dear or something. And that she would use this very much like a camouflage to protect herself with on a planet where she could assume a pleasing form, where she could become who you wanted to see. And now she's on that planet. And the captain's fear is that anything should harm the ship. That's part of his gig is somewhere in there. He's got to say, not aboard my ship. Nobody dies aboard my ship, you know. But he takes it all very seriously because he's a commander of men, and he's a captain. He's accepted the authority, and therefore he has got the responsibility, and his responsibility is to literally go first in this melodrama that they've concocted. So I must use all of their stuff. The doctor must have something to do. But I think I'm the first one that wrote the line, "He's dead, Jim," although it was written a dozen times by later on. But that's the doctor's job, is to verify the death and everything. Let the doctor do it. "He's dead, Jim." You know, he tried to vary it. DeForest Kelley talked about that. He thought that was rather ironic that he had many of the lines he had to say again and again and again. But that was in the cards also, because when one looks at the tile on part of a mosaic, which is their episode, or their couple of episodes, and now you see how those tiles fit together, and you see that endless expanse of tiles, and every one of those is going to be filled with a guy coming along with a half of a story saying, yes, I could write a Star Trek as a work for hire. I wouldn't own my story. I would give you all right and title to anything I create here for you as an employee. So I talked to Gene Roddenberry. It became clear that he wanted me to write an episode. It became clear I wanted to write an episode. His attorney, his agent, talked to my agent. The deal was made. I was hired to write an outline. First, I wrote an outline. Then I was hired to write a a first, a rewrite of the outline. Sometimes in shows that can be a completely different story. They've got you, that doesn't work, let's try something else because you owe us another outline, so what the hell. And many people are coerced into writing yet even a second outline as part of that first outline, and those just getting the outline part of it. Now they can accept the outline and reject me. They can accept the outline with an option to exercise, to have me write a screenplay for it, which they then exercise, which then gives me more money, which puts me to work writing a teleplay based upon my outline, based upon the best way I could take my character, whom I thought of as a damsel with a dulcimer. That was my working title on that script, which became known as The Man Trap and was about Nancy, the salt vampire, which was shown as the first episode to be aired in America of the Star Trek series, which gives me the honorary title of the premiere episode of Star Trek. But it was just another work for hire. They had a half a dozen of them prepared. The people at NBC Brass decided, where can we get a lead-off piece for it that will come on 1 week before the pilot is due to air, because we've bought up the time from The Fugitive. We've bought their last half an hour or last hour, and now we can stick anything in that hour we want to. People will tune in thinking they're going to see the last part of The Fugitive, and they'll be getting something. Now, what shall we use? They had a half a dozen. They grabbed mine, stuck it in there, and then aired it as the premiere episode. But again, it was just a case of me with my damsel with a dulcimer, based upon that Kubla Khan poem of Taylor Coleridge. In Xanadu did Kubla Khan a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alph the sacred river ran through caverns measureless to man down to the sunless sea. Where there, and then it goes on to talk about a maiden, and I thought about a damsel with a dulcimer, because in the next verse that there's a damsel with a dulcimer in a vision once I saw. And so I took that damsel with a dulcimer as my title. And it eventually became Man Trap, because the creature was really a kind of a trap for man because of its ability to camouflage itself by assuming different forms and finally getting aboard the ship where it had a great potential for jeopardy. My real voice is down here in case anyone is asking.
How many, was that the only episode of Star Trek you wrote? Any others, or?
I wrote a second one in the form of an outline. The outline was going to be changed by the producers because a new producer came aboard. And so, consequently, as a result of some other things, it was never made. It was called Rockabyebaby or Die. It is bought back by me. I own it. It's half of that story is mine. And it, again, is a second Star Trek show. But it has never been aired, never been produced, in fact, never had a screenplay written based upon the story. So.
Is that it? Are we done now? You got a question?
Have you ever smoked with Gene Roddenberry?
No, Gene is a cop.
Oh.
Although Gene was a long-haired cop there for a while. But Gene is still a cop, basically in his mind of minds. And I'm a hippie. There's a world of difference between us. No, you can stage people that way. Like, I think of Bill Clinton. He's the president of the student body. He's the guy we would hire to stand up before us and make the valedictorian, which none of us really believe, but he's got to say it in that stirring way. He's got to be part actor. He's got to remember his lines. He's got to be the president of the student body. I mean, if you think of the whole universe as a school ground, you can assign people to their value system. You know, whether he's the literary society or the chess club, or whether he's the class dork, you know, the clown, the mimic, the fool, because he'll grow up to be Carlin. What's his name? George Carlin, see? The class clown, the guy who, for some reason, is compelled by his personality to assume some structured role on the school ground.
That's awesome.
Oh, we're very routinized creatures. You know, we see what we see because we've been trained to see that way. But there must be, they talk about autistic people who are mentally damaged in a way that all of their senses have turned inward and they're no longer experiencing the whole world. I wonder what is going on there, because most of the saints adjure us to become desireless, to forswear the world and all of its rewards, to pile up our treasure in heaven, that the manifestly real here is a mistake to think of it as real, because it's dross, it's corruption, it's mold, it's... Now this idea permeates our society, and yet you would hardly guess it but you could ask anyone about this. Everyone seems to believe that there's a war between two mighty forces, which they call good and which they call evil, and they personify it by calling one the devil and the other call the other one God. And they have an idea of a great interstellar war, and they go back to the Hindu documents, and they have pictorizations, and back to the Aztecs, and they have pictorizations of Star Wars.